Freedom from Anger podcast. I have another great guest today, Dr. Dennis Wormald. He's a dog anxiety expert and veterinarian. Dr. Wormald got his PhD from the University of Melbourne in Australia with a focus on canine anxiety. Earlier this year, published a book titled A Dedication to Difficult Dogs, which gives a fresh perspective on canine mental health. The book covers common misconceptions of dog behavior. It's available on Amazon. It's got several 5-star reviews. Also in 2018, Dr. Wormald founded abadog.com, which is a behavioral advice platform used by veterinarians across the globe to provide information for their patients. I will post a link to all of those in the description of the podcast. And if that wasn't enough, Dr. Wormald is currently developing an automated dog training device to provide classical conditioning using artificial intelligence. Welcome, Dr. Wormald. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I'm very excited to talk, things dog behavior with you today.
Oh, yeah, I think it's going to be great. And like I said, my dog knows a thing about anxiety. So hopefully I can pick up some tips and along with the listeners, pick up some tips on our best friends.
Absolutely. And yeah, they are our best friends. They're often part of our family, and people really want to do well by dogs and love them. But sometimes it's hard if you don't have the information or the knowledge when it comes to behavior, because dog behavior is not something that normally you can get very far with just on intuition. And people say, oh, I grew up with dogs, like I understand them and all that. And yeah, if you've had dogs, you'll understand them absolutely to a degree. But because as human beings, we naturally tend to read and speak human body language and human language. But different animals, every species of animal has got its own way of communicating with body language. And you can learn a bit just by living with dogs, but unless you really study it and look at the science and really go deep into it, there's only so far you can get. So educating yourself and learning, it's a skill that can be learned. It's definitely really beneficial for you to be able to, understand and communicate with what is, a member of your family, like you said. Do you notice there's certain things that your dog does? What's your dog's name, by the way?
My dog, her name is Willow.
So are there things Willow does, ways she communicates to you and you pick up on them? Like everyone has got things like stories. What's yours?
Sometimes she'll whine if she wants something, but if she's scared or frightened, she likes to crawl behind my back or just any way to get behind me. It could be, I could be laying in bed and she'd be like sitting on top of my head, like on the pillow. So that's kind of
that's really sweet. That tells me that you're a source of security for her and that she's really well bonded with you, which is really lovely. We do want to be able to comfort our animals when they're stressed and worried. And I think you said that noises worry Willow a little bit, like thunderstorms and things like that. And there's lots of things out there that can worry dogs and upset them. And as a social species, they live in a group. They live in the wild, the wolves lived in packs, and now domestic dogs, they live in family groups with us, and they're designed to communicate in that group, and they're designed to be able to let us know and also understand when we are feeling certain ways. And they really do communicate a lot of their emotions. So if they're stressed or scared or worried or playful or hungry, like that emotion they're feeling, they're going to be really good at trying to get that across to you. And likewise, they can often pick up on our emotions to a degree as well, depending on how we're behaving. And I think it's really good that you're picking up and noticing that in Willow, because a lot of people do struggle when they're not noticing some of the emotions or they're misinterpreting them. And a really common one is, dogs that, for example, are barking, and it's quite annoying. If you've got a dog inside the house that's barking a lot, it makes you feel frustrated, and it makes people feel often and that stress that the person feels when they snap, that's actually the stress the dog's feeling. And the dog's communicated that stress and worry that they've got. And the people in the house pick up on that, and it sort of spreads to them. And And likewise, I think if Willow gets stressed enough or gets worried enough, you also will be a little bit worried about her because she's worried too. And it's just part of being in a social group. And it's a very lovely thing. And I think it's to be encouraged, that communication. So yeah, it's good you pick up on that. But yeah, there's a lot of topics to talk about. And so yeah, definitely anxiety and storms is definitely one thing we can go into. Is there anything else with Willow that worries you about her? Any other situations where you think she might be worried?
Well, she was a rescue dog, so and I feel that maybe she had some past trauma with whoever had her before because there's certain things that she's not a real fan of kids. She's not like kids that that well. Takes her a while to warm up to new people. She does not like anybody touching her feet. So clipping her nails is, I know one time it took me, the vet, and the vet tech just to clip her nails. She just loses her mind. So I don't know if maybe there were some kids messing with her feet before we got her. But she's very protective and
Yeah.
definitely does not like to be alone.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, fortunately, my wife, she's here with her every day, so it was definitely a good fit.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you'd asked me to guess what other problems she had, I was going to say that she doesn't sound like the kind of dog that likes to be alone. I often see dogs that get worried with noises and really go to their owners for comfort when they're worried by those noises and burrow in and use their owners to help comfort them when they're worried. Those dogs often don't like being left alone, understandably, because I think the people in their lives help them manage their anxiety and their worry. And when we're not around and they're left on their own, that's their tool that they use for managing their anxiety. That's not available anymore. And so, as you can imagine, that'd be pretty stressful, I think. Yeah, I think I'm guessing, would there be examples in people as well that similarly, when they're stressed, if they can't do what they normally do when they're stressed to relieve that stress, that ends up causing problems?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. I know a lot of people that we work with, if they're not able to manage their anger and manage their stress, then it leads to, physical ailments. It leads to incarceration, and it just kind of snowballs. And just dawned on me another thing that I really noticed is she loves to lick, and I think she does it. I think that's kind of one of her ways to kind of lower her anxiety a little bit. Like she might start licking you for 5 minutes without stopping,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
usually around
Yeah.
those times
So-
where, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons a dog can lick a person, but when it's going for 5 minutes, I think there might be some, truth to what you're saying in that if she's an otherwise anxious dog, that's a long time to lick another person. There's a lot of reasons for a dog to lick a person. Like it can be a normal grooming behavior. We call it allo grooming when animals groom, another animal within their social group. It's a bonding behavior. And so that's definitely possible. But then at the same time, licking things can also be an outlet for stress. Dogs do relieve their stress through oral behaviors. That's licking and chewing things. So that's why we sometimes recommend like a licky mat. Have you heard of that before? It's essentially a mat that you smear like a food paste or like a peanut paste or something on top of it. But then it's got like bumps all over it so that when the dog licks it, it takes a long time to lick it out of all the grooves of the mat. It's like a silicone mat. And that can be a way of giving a dog something to do, something to lick that can calm it down, that can take 15 minutes to clean it up because it's just difficult. But it's a way of giving your dog something to do. It helps calm them down. The endorphins are released from them through the behavior of licking and chewing. So it helps calm them down. So yeah, they can do it for that reason. And also sometimes they genuinely like the taste of the sweat on your skin, believe it or not. Like a salt lick, you might have heard of other animals that will lick salt. Like I've seen examples of parrots and horses and cows and like all sorts of animals can find it enjoyable to lick salt. There's just so many reasons. And I mean, when you hear someone give a quick, short, sharp answer on what something means in a dog, I think it's a sign that maybe that they are either simplifying it for you or that maybe they understand how complicated dog behavior can be. And so with my clients and my patients, I actually spend normally 2 hours minimum with them, and a good half an hour to an hour of that's just asking question after question and watching the dog, because there's so many reasons for behavior. Generally speaking, when a dog's anxious, they can do anything for their anxiety, because just like people, imagine what can a person do when they're anxious to relieve their anxiety? Literally just about anything that a person does. Eating, yes. Things like drugs and alcohol, yes, but exercising, talking to people for their anxiety, like reading a book if you're anxious might help you. Some people feel better. Gaming, like the list goes on. Like you can do just about anything to help relieve your anxiety, because the one commonality I think is that they're active behaviors that get your mind in the present and get you doing something rather than sitting there and just worrying and stressing. And so, believe it or not, just about any behavior a dog does can be normally due to anxiety. It's possible. And it just takes a little bit of thinking and questioning to figure out if it actually is anxiety, in that specific situation. So, yeah, for your dog, I'd say, yeah, definitely could be, especially if it's going for 5 minutes. That seems like a long time. But also, you might notice it happens when there's other signs of anxiety going on, and it's a cluster of behaviors. So, that could definitely be part of it. Yeah. Do you know what kind of things your little Willow does when she is anxious? Have you noticed there's certain behaviors that you?
Uh, I usually, like earlier, she'll make it a point to, I want to get in my lap like she is now. Or if I get up, she'll follow me around. A lot of times she likes to get under the covers.
Yeah,
But yeah, she definitely lets when she's
yeah,
not happy.
absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's so many different signs that they show, and can guarantee you there's more that you're missing as well. And that doesn't make you a bad owner or anything. It's just, like I said, these things aren't intuitive. It's like we're born to read the body language of every species on this planet, even if we live with them. So yeah, a lot of dogs, they will lick their lips or yawn when they're a little bit worried. That's called a displacement behavior, a bit like fiddling. A lot of dogs will pant actually when they're anxious as well. So they'll have their mouth open and they'll be breathing a bit faster. They'll be pacing, unable to settle. Even if she's close to you, she might be moving around a lot. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of behaviors there. And like I said before, though, they can be normal, right? So panting is a good one. There's actually a lot of reasons why a dog pants. Can you think of many reasons why a dog might open their mouth and do that sound? Do you know any reason why they do it, or is it just smiling to you? It's okay if you don't, because so many people struggle with this, and this is
Yeah.
just not me trying to say that you're not knowledgeable about behavior. I'm just trying to explain that it's really common for people not to pick up on things like this. And it's not a sign that you're not a good dog person or a good owner, or that your dog doesn't love you to bits. It's just, that's just something that people naturally don't look at as a thing, because it's not part of human behavior. Humans don't open their mouth and go like that. It's just not a normal thing that we do. And so we don't know how to read that intuitively, but it's actually can mean a lot in dog body language. So if you ask a vet, normally the reason they'll say that a dog pants is because they're overheated. And so they're a little bit hot, or maybe they've been exercising and they're puffed out, which actually that's the one reason people do it, if they're puffed out. But what about if someone's hyperventilating and really stressed, gasping for air? They're not exercising. They're just sitting there, hyperventilating and stressed. So actually dogs can do that as well. And it's actually quite common. They jump to this stress panting and stress breathing behavior much faster than humans do. So humans have to be really, really panicked and stressed to start doing that. But dogs only have to be moderately stressed to start doing that. So you often see it happen in dogs that are stressed quite commonly, and they'll move in and out of that panting behavior. So it'll just look like they're smiling to a lot of people. They'll open their mouth. You'll start to maybe see the tongue poke out a little bit, maybe not. And they'll start that open mouth breathing. And it can be sure that they're overheating. It can be that they're exercising. It can even be that they're in pain, or that they've got a respiratory tract problem. Like, for example, some bulldogs or French bulldogs that can't breathe properly just breathe like that half the time because they can't breathe through their noses. But for most dogs, yeah, they're panting for a reason. Every dog pants for a reason. They don't pant for no reason. And dogs don't really smile. They're not humans. That doesn't work. That's not their body language. A good example of how smiling means different things in different animals is actually chimpanzees. Have you heard about what a smile means to a chimpanzee?
Does that mean like aggression or something?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So at the zoo in Melbourne, at least, they don't let people be seen by the chimpanzees in the zoo enclosure because people naturally look at them and they smile, and the chimps get really stressed out because all these people are walking past and baring their teeth, showing their teeth. Well, it's actually quite strange for a smile to be a friendly interaction because in most animals, they're growling and they lift their lips and they're showing their teeth as like a warning and an aggression. So that's just another example of where, as humans, we just naturally read behavior a very different way to what happens in animals. So yeah, dogs do not smile for happiness. We don't call it a smile at all. There's a rare behavior that we call a grin that certain breeds do, like Dalmatians in particular in Australia, are more likely to grin, where they sort of lift their front teeth and show them, but it's not a pant. Their whole mouth isn't open, and they do that behavior to actually sort of signal that they do want to interact, and they're kind of, it's easing behavior. So they're kind of trying to say, look, I'm not a threat. I like you. And that's called a grin, but most dogs don't do that. And people that haven't seen it before actually think the dog might be baring their teeth and like growling or snarling it, because if you don't understand what that means, it can look a little bit scary. It looks more like the dog's being aggressive than it does look like it's actually smiling. So yeah, if you have never looked at your dog's face and just based on their face alone, looked at their face and thought, wow, my dog looks stressed, then that just means that you haven't learned to read that yet. Because are there any humans on earth that have never been stressed? If you're living with a human and you've never seen that human stressed, you've seen them every day and you've never seen that person stressed, you just can't read their body language of that person. It's normal to get stressed occasionally. Everyone does it. It's completely normal. So likewise, if you're living with a dog and you never looked at your dog's face and thought, wow, my dog looks a bit stressed right now, then you just haven't learned how to read that. I can look at a dog's face and read stress in them. It's something that could be learned. Like I said, it's just not intuitive. There's nothing wrong with you as an owner. It's just that I've studied this for a long time, but you can see that they'll get frown wrinkles on top of their head often. Maybe they'll hold their ear back a little bit. Panting's a really common one. Often when they're panting, there's like wrinkles on the side of their cheeks that show that they're not just relaxed panting. So a dog that's hot, when they're panting, their muscles around their face are more relaxed and their lips droop out and down more at the back, especially. Depends on the dog. So there's a whole lot to know there. And I think that people don't know that they don't know. It's like the idea, like an unknown unknown, that saying. Yeah, there's so much to know and so much that can be learned. And yeah, you can hear my dog shaking there. She's playing with the cat at the moment. And after some attention, I think it's sunny outside and she wants me to take her out for a you know what, that word I want to say. So yeah, a lot of people, just to finish up on this little spiel I'm having here, I tend to talk a lot, but this whole thing about it being a whole new world, understanding a dog, my book really goes into it, and it's a bit intimidating and eye-opening for people sometimes because they didn't realize how much they didn't know. They didn't realize how wrong they could have been getting things. And some people actually feel bad reading the book because even though it's opened their eyes, they now can't unsee what they can see. And they realize that maybe they would have done things a lot differently if they'd known with their own pet. And so I have the mindset that there's no blame to anyone who reads this book and then realizes that, oh crap, I did not realize I was doing that. I did not realize I was misreading my dog so much. There's no blame at all there. If you've done something differently in the past, we all have, when we don't know any better, it's, your heart's in the right place. You're trying as an owner to do the best for your dog. That's what counts. But I do think that there is one thing that maybe you can put blame on yourself for, which is that have you actually gone out of your way to try and figure out and learn a little bit and see if maybe there was more you could do for your dog? Maybe a little bit of reading, a little bit of education. Doesn't have to be a lot of, you don't have to read books every day for the rest of your life, but maybe get a couple of books or do a little bit of self-education just to learn, because it's kind of like benign neglect, like, negligence, like not knowing because you don't want to look, versus looking and finding out and doing a little bit of research to try and figure out how to make your dog happy, how to prevent them from getting stressed. And I think a key sort of indicator that maybe it's a really good idea to do research, understanding stress and anxiety in dogs for yourself and learning a bit, is if your dog's difficult in any way. Because one thing I found is that either people can know their dog's stressed and anxious, or they find that their dog is difficult to train and difficult to manage. And those are the two situations where I find it's most likely by far that the dog has got some sort of worry or stress or mental health issue in its life that may or may not be diagnosed or understood by the owners. But it is, yeah, I think does that sort of make sense? Would you agree with any of that, or what do you think about all that I've said? That's a lot.
Oh no, definitely. There's nothing wrong with being ignorant about something. Ignorance just means you're uneducated. We're
Absolutely.
all uneducated about certain things,
Absolutely.
and I think it happens to a lot of people. The more you're educated, the more you kind of look back and
Yeah,
to practice that forgiving yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Like you said, you don't know what you don't know. Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, I've definitely thought about trying to educate myself on more about my dog and her emotions and whatnot.
Yep.
Because I definitely we don't really think a lot about animal mental health. It's
Don't.
like it's like we know that they have emotions and all that, and
Yes, absolutely.
but we don't think about their overall mental health. We just kind of
Yeah, that is
well,
so true. And I think the amount of knowledge that's out there and in society about dog mental health, it's like in the mid-90s about human mental health. If you remember back, it just was a completely different environment and understanding of human mental health back then. And it wasn't that people were stupid or anything like that. It just, society just hadn't been, I guess, educated. They hadn't learnt about the importance of it and what it means. And that's really useful as an analogy for dogs and animals. And because they get a whole bunch of mental health problems too. And by mental health, it's just what it means in humans. It means struggling to cope, feeling stressed, worried, scared. It's got welfare implications for animals, just like it has welfare implications for people as well. It's just like with people, it's so often tied to emotions, mental health. It's
mm,
dogs that are really struggling, but with different things, with dog related problems instead of human related problems that we have. And so, yeah, there's a long way for society to come to catch up, particularly because it is a different species. And so
mm,
it's less intuitive. We can't just all completely relate when we see a dog barking at another dog on the street, or a dog trembling from the sound of a thunderstorm, because that's not only anything that us or anyone we know has gone through. And so it makes it a little bit harder, but it's actually, it doesn't take that much time to bring yourself up to speed and learn. And I think one of the difficulties is, though, where do you learn from? What's your sources? Because there's a lot of information out there that, quite frankly, I think is terrible on dog behavior. That's really harmful. We come from a place in dog behavior education and understanding where, look, in the mid-90s, everyone was teaching dominance and leader of the pack and physical corrections and physical punishments to get dogs to behave. And it's very much the mentality of, we're the master and
mm,
they are our, I guess, subject to train, and that they have to do things to make us happy and they shouldn't do things that make us unhappy. And it's all about us dominating them and us being the center of their universe and the reason for their existence. And that almost like we're their gods and they should be like praying to us and doing the drop of a hat. They should be sitting without a treat, and my dog should be obedient, and all of this terminology and ideas that it really takes away the autonomy and the sentience and idea that a dog has its own feelings and emotions and wants and needs, and that even that it has rights, I guess. The concept of abuse has changed a lot as well. You know, back then, abuse would be if you hit your dog and injured it, or didn't feed your dog. But now I think that from my perspective, abuse is if you hit your dog ever. It doesn't matter if it's done something bad. From my perspective, if you hit or shock your dog, that is abuse out and right. And there's a long way to come for people that have been brought up with this training ideology that it's all about being a firm leader and teaching your dog to submit to you, and that teaching your dog right and wrong and all of that stuff. And it's just so far off base. And the problem with it is it's catchy because it's more like how people think. And so we understand it more. Whereas reality is more like how dogs think, which isn't intuitive for us. So all of the catchy training ideas seem catchy and make sense to us because it's like, that's how we think. And so it makes sense. But actually the ones that are like how the dog thinks, it's not as intuitive to us. And so because of that, it doesn't catch on as easily, even though it's correct. Science shows that it's correct. And so when you get to the level of PhDs and academics around dog behavior, and if you look at and talk to any of the specialists in veterinary behavior around the world, we all are on the same page 100% about how dogs think and what the best ways to train them and to treat them behavior issues are. But then when you get down to the level of dog trainers, then there's a whole lot of variation. And some of the trainers are writing books, and some of these books are great and some of them are terrible. And so how do you know which one to pick, right? And so even people listening to you, how do they know to trust me, right? It's that there's a bit of a death of expertise as well in society now, as you know, like, you know, do you trust someone like me that's got a PhD and spent their whole life studying it and, you know, is a veterinarian and all that? Or do you trust this charismatic character on television that, you know, is doing things that appear to work really well to your untrained eye? Even though when I watch it, I cringe and I can see that these dogs, rather than being fixed and all of a sudden behaving well for the owner, in a lot of cases, I see a dog that has been forced into submission and dominated into behaving the right way, which from my point of perspective is so sad. It's like, imagine you watched a TV show where people were training other people and they got someone that kept on crying and screaming because they were scared and depressed, someone with a mental health illness, right? That's screaming on the street because they're so scared of other people because they've been traumatized in the past, and they're crying to their mum. And that person gets trained to stop screaming and crying because every time they scream or cry, they get hit. So they'll learn not to scream or cry.
Yeah, you're right. I think some of it has to do with, you look at, we view our pets as children, like these are our children, and we try to raise them like we do our children. And if you're a firm believer in corporal punishment, then if your child's bad, you spank them, you scold them, and we just kind of transfer that onto our
This is so true.
fur
I've
babies.
had people say to me, I've had people say to me, well, that's fine, Dennis, if that's how you want to train, but just like there's different parenting styles, I'm going to train my dog different to how you're going to train your dog. And it's just different styles, whatever works. And the problem I have in that is, would you, if just say that you were speaking to someone that did use that kind of corporal punishment for their kids, and that was how they wanted to teach their kids right from wrong, at what age do they start doing that? Do they do that to their kid at 3 months old when it's a baby and crying? Right? Are they giving it a smack then? Because you got to think, if not, then why not? Right? I think it's because people understand that when a baby's that young, they don't understand right from wrong. So you can't teach them. There's no point hitting them. They don't know. They don't understand. But that's where dogs are. They don't understand right from wrong. And I can talk about that a lot because that's a common misconception, that people think dogs understand right from wrong. And that simple idea, I'll get to it in a minute if you like, but just imagine for a second I'm right. Imagine I'm right and that dogs don't understand right from wrong, right? That one idea, thinking that a dog understands right from wrong, is, I believe, one of the main reasons why people punish their dogs, because they think they're trying to teach their dog a lesson, teach their dog to learn right from wrong. And so that's a big problem, because that assumption that dogs know right from wrong then leads to people using this style of puppy parenting, right? That isn't required. I've never used it. And also, if your dog doesn't understand right from wrong, well, you're not really teaching your dog anything. You're just hurting it. And it's learning not about it's not learning a moral code, if you get what I mean. So a dog can behave in a way you like without having moral code. It just learns that when it does something, let's call it, when it does thing A, then it gets hit. And when it does thing B, it doesn't get hit. So it learns to do thing B. It doesn't have to know if it's right or wrong to do thing A and thing B. It doesn't have to understand that we're happy or sad or annoyed by it or don't want it to do it. It just has to know what's going to get it hit and not do the thing that's going to get it hit. So the thing is that everything that, like, punishment is like a positive thing that, positive's a training term. It means you're adding something, right? So punishment, when you're like hitting or yelling or saying no to your dog, like that's something you're adding in to try and make the dog do that thing less. But in just about every situation, there's something else you could be saying or doing to your dog that would make your dog do something else more. And by doing that something else more, they'll do the other thing less. Perfect example, dog jumping up on the counter at home on your bench. It's just a puppy. It's having a look, it can smell some food up there. It's thinking, okay, I'm going to try to get this food. You could say no to your dog and yell at your dog. And your dog might eventually learn that when it goes up on the counter, it gets yelled at. And so it could learn that going up on the counter is not much fun because you get yelled at. It doesn't learn it's wrong, right? It doesn't have that morality, but it learns not to do it because it gets yelled at. Or I could call my dog over to me for a treat every time it jumps up on the counter. And then what it learns instead is that if it tries to jump up on the counter, it can come over to get a treat off me instead. And then because dogs and puppies learn through habits, if you do that consistently, after a few months' time, your dog will have jumped up on the counter a few times, never gotten anything to eat off it because you're supervising them properly, come over to you for a treat some of the time. You're giving it treats other times anyway. And so your dog has basically, you've got the same outcome. It's come down off the counter basically each time. If you say no or you call over for a treat, your dog gets down off the counter either way. And over time, your dog learns not to do it because it's never ever gotten any food off there. It learns to not bother trying. It's kind of like, I don't know, there's a funny video of a dogs that walk up to a doorway and there's a glass door and they stop, but the glass is missing in the door. And then the person opens the sliding door and then the dogs walk through, even though it was open the whole time. But because the dogs always were used to there being glass there before, they didn't understand. And it's just their habit and it's what they do. And so you can get dogs to behave however you like by just setting up the habit for them. You don't actually have to teach them right from wrong. I've raised my dog without ever saying the word no or telling off for anything. And she's a lovely dog, a beautiful, very easy to care for dog. And I never tried to teach her right from wrong. And yeah, I think it's one of the many common misconceptions that people have. And yeah, I think sometimes dogs learn in spite of what we do, not because of what we do. So yes, doing all this stuff, they can learn in spite of us understanding things wrong. In spite of all of that, they can learn to be what we would consider well-behaved. So there's people out there listening that have done all this stuff that I would say they're doing it wrong. And in spite of that, the dog can still learn. Absolutely. But the biggest problem is that even though there's dogs can still make it despite us not doing things, the way science and what I'd recommend doing, the biggest problem is not with the dogs that's just, they put up with it. They're like, oh yeah, this isn't great. I'm a resilient dog. I can put up with it. The issue is the dogs have got what I'd call, mental health problems. They've got severe anxiety or they're extremely stressed. And then the way they're being treated can actually trigger and make that anxiety worse, because we know punishment and yelling and stressful training practices at home with your caregiver do not help mental health. And similarly with people with mental health, if you've got depression or anxiety, if your parents are yelling at you and hitting you, that's not going to be helping either, right? So that's one of the biggest issues. And there's a similar prevalence of mental health problems in dogs as there is mental health problems in people. So there's plenty of dogs out there, and you're very, very like caring and like understanding person to have adopted a dog from a rescue, because
Mm.
that's a dog that you've given a home to, and a dog that also is at a higher likelihood of having mental health problems. And like you've noticed, your dog often does stress out about things. Yeah, it sounds like there is something going on there, and you're doing your best to help your dog cope, which is great. Your dog's landed into a very understanding family, and so that's great. And I think for dogs like that, the no punishment training methods, I think, is even more important than your average dog. And so, yeah, that's why I just, as a blanket rule, I would never recommend that.
Yeah, I've definitely been guilty of all those things because that's just, I don't know. That's kind of the old way of thinking. If the dog messes in the floor, then rub their nose in it, that kind of deal. Like, no, bad dog. And
Absolutely.
we really don't think about what if that was being done to us? No, that'd probably leave a mark, especially we
That's
don't
so true.
think about that trauma.
Yeah, that's so true. And people, I think we also assume dogs are smarter than they are. We assume they've got morality and they understand they've been bad. They don't understand. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts as far as like medications? So, for my little dog, my vet prescribed her trazodone. Say if there's 4th of July or something coming up, or if she's feeling overly stressed, you can give her a trazodone. That'll make her sleepy. And are you a big fan of Valium for dogs or trazodone or?
Yeah. Good question. Look, there's a lot of medications that can be used for dog behavior, and they're all medications that are used in human mental health
Mm,
treatment. And I think it's a big topic, and a lot different discussions could be had around different aspects of it. But I wouldn't say, it's hard to just say whether I'm a big fan of it or not, I guess, because I think that it's just like anything in this world, it can be used for good or bad. So, am I a big fan of guns? Well, they can be used for good or bad, right? Same with all sorts of things like the internet, for example, can be used by criminals, can be used by the rest of us as well. So, I think that this is an example where it really is good to compare for human mental health. So, I actually like to take one step further back first, because dogs are a little bit like kids. They can't consent and think about whether or not they want to take medication or not. We give it to them whether they want it or not. Right. So it's a bit like with children. So if you have a child that's got to feed well, or maybe they're in pain, right? But as a parent, you don't believe morally that it's right to have pain relief because you don't want any drugs. You like natural stuff. You don't want any drugs. There's some situations where if a kid's in enough pain, like it's considered abuse, so you have to treat that pain. Whether the kid consents or not, they can't consent. They're too young, because if they're in severe agony and you're not taking them and treating them and getting that pain treated, then you're a bad parent, right? And so similarly, if you got a dog that's in pain, doesn't matter if you've got a splitting headache and you don't want to take your headache tablets because you don't believe in that. You think it's better just to put up with it and you want to be natural, right? And that's your belief. But then if you then putting that belief onto your animals, right? Your animals don't have those beliefs. So they don't get to feel, justified for not having the pain relief. They just feel in pain, right? So that's one of the reasons why welfare organizations say that if you've got an animal in pain, you got to treat it, or well, that's inhumane. Like you can't keep an animal with a broken leg and not treat that. You have to do something, or else that's illegal. Like that's abuse. That's animal abuse if you're doing that. And so that's physical pain, right? But we all know that mental pain can be just as painful as physical pain. And with mental pain, it happens even more that people think, okay, I'm set, but that's all right. I don't want to take medications. I just want to put up with it. I don't believe in medications. I just want to talk it out. I want to try and fix this without them. And that's fine if that's your moral ideals, but you're getting the self-satisfaction of knowing you're doing that for a reason because you don't want to. But an animal can't have that idea, the deals. They can't have those thoughts. They just feel stressed and worried or not. And if they're feeling stressed and panicked and you just decide not to give them medications because you wouldn't want medications for yourself for being really stressed, then I think that that's a little bit unfair on the animal. I think that we just have to think, okay, they're in a mental state that's extremely painful, extremely uncomfortable. They're panicking. They're extremely stressed. Is it right to deny them relief of this situation? And I don't think it is. And so for that reason, I think if an animal, is really suffering, if their welfare is really suffering from their mental health, I, in that situation, am a big fan of medications for that animal, assuming that they help that animal. And so it's always a trial. You got to start them on it and see, does it even work, right? If there's side effects, you don't know in advance how they're going to respond. If they respond really badly, you want them on it just as much as anyone else does, right? But if it's used at the right dose under the guidance of a veterinarian and the animal's assessed, and then you have a look at how they respond. And if you look at their response and they are coping much better with that stress and anxiety and that fear, and they're happier and calmer, then I'm a big fan in that situation. I think, who wouldn't be? An animal's gone from being extremely upset to being less upset. And I think that it's a no-brainer myself. Does that make any sense to you?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. Because like you said, they're like children. They can't consent. They can't talk to you. So, and if they're in pain, you
Yep.
definitely don't want them to be in pain. Well, what
Yep.
are your thoughts? I know some people have used CBD on their pets to help kind of relieve
Yeah.
some anxiety. I don't know. I'm guessing y'all
Yeah.
have that down there in Australia as well, CBD.
Yeah, we do.
Mm.
Yeah, we do. And look, I'll first state up front that I've got no personal bias against medicinal cannabis for use in people. I would certainly take it myself if I needed to, if I felt like I was unwell and it might help. And I've got nothing against it, even where it's legal and allowed recreationally. I think that's just my personal opinion. I think that's fine as well. And I understand people that don't have that opinion. But despite all that, I haven't seen any good evidence, and I never recommend CBD for anxiety in dogs, despite those being my personal thoughts in people. And that's not because, I think that it's necessarily bad for them. It's just that I haven't seen any good evidence that shows that it has an effect that it's, easily up in any of the science and even in other veterinary professionals who've used it. Certainly for pain, there is evidence that it can help with pain and potentially even seizure control in animals, but I haven't seen good evidence for use in anxiety. And I think that could be because it may be patient specific. It may be that it does absolutely nothing for half or 3/4 of dogs, but that it does help for 1/4 or something like that. But the problem is that if you've got a medication like that that's only working in a small proportion of the patients, I know how hard it is for owners to pick up and see when powerful, well-used, like anti-anxiety medications that I know work most of the time, and I see it working in a dog, how often those owners actually can't even pick it in their own dogs when I see profound effects on anxiety. So I just don't think that owners are going to be very good at picking up and noticing the effect some of the time. Some of the time they will be, but some of the time I think they won't be. And it just does depend on the case. And look, if it's prescribed by a vet, like this, it's safe and I'm happy for people to use it. I just don't prescribe it myself. And I think it's one of those things where different species, different effects. Like, for example, paracetamol, I think you call it acetaminophen in America, common over-the-counter pain relief tablet.
Yeah, Tylenol. Yeah.
For example, Tylenol. Yeah. So in cats, that stuff is deadly. like even in small doses, like a quarter of a tablet to a cat is probably going to kill it, right? But in dogs, depending on the weight of the dog, they're a bit more tolerant, but still it's very dangerous in dogs. If you give them too much, they die as well. But in people, yeah, if we overdose massively, yes, but it's much safer in people. And there's other medications where the normal dose of a dog on that medication is 10 times as much as the human dose. And then there's other medications that work well in dogs, but don't work well in people. And I just have a feeling that medicinal cannabis in dogs is just like with all those other medications. I think there's going to be similarities in what it can work for in dogs and people. I think there's going to be differences too. And definitely there's no obvious benefit. If there's a benefit there for CBD in dogs, I think it's subtle. And I think even when you ask people that do use it and say that it helps, generally they say that it doesn't have a huge effect that they can notice. It's a little bit more moderate. And there's other medicinal or herbal or safe alternatives that I've found personally do work a little bit better. Like there's one called Zilkene, which is based off milk powder that's been hydrolyzed, it's been chemically treated, this milk powder. And there's good evidence, and I see in my patients, in front of me, that it has an effect on them when they take it. And it's not profound, but I can pick it up a lot of the time, most of the time in the patients. And there's research that shows that helps. So,
and what was it called again?
That one's called Zilkene. Yeah, alpha casozepine, it's called.
Okay.
Yeah, so Zylkene, and that's available without a prescription, I think. In Australia it is, I'm assuming in the States as well. And it's just a little bit pricey, but you can certainly try that if you're a little bit worried. But always best to have a chat to your vet about it as well, and just check with them. And there's generally what I notice is that if there's a dog that's really sorry, my dog is barking at the moment. I'm not sure if you can hear that. She gets a little bit worried out the front if there's a big truck or something going past. Not too bad, but she will let out a bit of a bark. So I think that depending on the medication that's used for behavior in dogs can have differing levels of effect that can be easier or harder to notice. Now, I'm just going to go grab my dog. If you don't mind, I'll just bring her into here and calm her down a little bit and give her some treats.
No, that's fine.
She's always, ever since I've had, been a little bit scared by if something big and strange looking and goes past the front of the house, she'll get a little bit worried. So like we used to live next to a construction site, and big diggers with like big construction machinery would go past the fence, and she just got really scared by it. Big objects just scare her. It's just one of her things. Generally speaking, she's a very calm, happy dog, but big thing like big trucks going past the house, they do worry her a little bit. And she's been worse than this. She's actually pretty good, because if I'm home, she'll come straight to me when I call her. She'll come straight to me when I call her, and then she'll settle next to me and calm down. So she's very easy to settle. But it's just an example of when, some dogs just don't like some things, and as long as they're exposed to them, they're not going to be happy. It doesn't matter what you do. So I have trained her to be much better than she was, but still, they still worry her. So back to the medications. So generally speaking, the medications that don't have any side effects, that are safer to give and don't need a prescription, generally they don't have quite as powerful an effect as the ones that can have side effects and that do require a prescription. And, it's not that the more powerful ones, the stronger ones, are bad because of the side effects. It just means you have to be really careful with how they're used, because if it just means that there's more potential for them not being used correctly and causing problems, because when they're used correctly, they shouldn't have side effects at all, or very, very minimum. So knowing how to monitor and do it properly, that's part of my job as a vet that does behavior, is understanding that and knowing how to do it in a way that doesn't cause all the things that people worry about before putting their animals on medication, which is fair enough. We don't want bad things to happen to our pets. So I totally get that. But you've got to be careful. Even with CBD, it can have THC contamination in it, which can make them unwell. So you got to be careful.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of trendy now with the CBD. And like you said, if it helps humans, and it should do this exact same for dogs. But like you said, different medications do different things, So you have to really, like you said, consult your veterinarian, get their take on it. And I think if medications are necessary and if it increases the quality of life for your animal, if you're going to do it, I think my listeners definitely will learn a lot. And hopefully they take it upon themselves to check out your book and really educate themselves on your dog's mental health. We obsess over what kind of dog food are we feeding our dogs, but we don't really think
Yeah,
about their overall mental health. So
absolutely.
I'm a
So
firm
yeah,
believer a
I
little
would
education goes a long way.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, thanks for that. Thanks for recommending the book. I think that it's, yeah, despite us covering so much ground today, there's a lot left in the book that we have not even touched upon at all. So certainly don't think that you got on all of it from this discussion. There's so much more in there. And it's actually written in a way that it's super, super easy to digest. One of the best feedbacks I get from most common feedbacks is how easy of a read it is just to get through the whole book. It's not overly complicated. It's written very simple language, and it's got a story running through it as well, like a story about two different dogs and how they deal with their mental health issues despite having problems with being understood by their owners. And so with a combination of that and then little informational sections as well, the hardest bit about it is that at times you can feel a little bit bad that these dogs are so misunderstood. That's the hardest thing. Getting it itself and the reading of the words is very, very digestible, very easy. So yeah, thanks so much for the recommendation. Yeah, I think it'll be well received.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I look forward to picking up my own copy and giving it a look. And like you said, I'm probably going to feel bad for a little while after I get done reading it because all the signs and stuff that we miss when it comes
Yeah.
to our dog. One final, quick question. Let's say I really wanted to get into educating myself on training my dog and really being in tune with my dog. And like you said, there's a lot of good trainers out there, there's a lot of bad trainers out there. What is some possible red flags that I probably don't need to be learning from this individual or this person's style
Yeah.
of training?
I think people that are promising quick results or permanent results, it's a bit like saying, hey, see me. I'll fix any depression in 1 day course and you'll be fixed for life, right? You're not going to believe me. No one's going to believe me because we understand how hard it is to fix some of these things. And it's the same things with dogs. If they're making it out as though it's really simple, it probably means they understand it very well. So that's one thing. That's a red flag. Quick fixes and permanent fixes and like doggy boot camps where we'll fix your dog and then you get it back and then for life. It's like, if that was the case, every kid with depression would go off to a depression camp and come back cured for the rest of their life. Like it's not simple. It's a lifelong thing that these dogs are dealing with. That's one problem, that one red flag. Another obvious big red flag after talking to me today is if a trainer or someone is saying that you need to assert your authority or teach right from wrong, or that a dog is using terminology like naughty or bad or anything like that, if they're using any punishment like hitting the dog, shock collars, even a little pop on the leash where they have the collar up high on the neck, a flat collar attached to a leash, and they pop it up. And that little jerking motion on the neck, they'll use the word correction. They'll say that it's not actually punishment, but I don't have time to go into it now, but it's the same thing. It's just less intense and it's the same principles. And it's the principles that are the problem just as much as the action of hurting the dog. It's the principles of wanting to even use that technique in the first place because it's just not needed and it's the wrong way of thinking about it. And so, yeah, absolutely. That's another red flag. And so good things to think about are people that are looking at using positive only and that kind of stuff, and understanding that if you're going to go down the positive only route, that you might not actually see as much improvement quickly and it might be harder, but you're doing things the right way. And the easy way is not the right way. and you get better long-term results. So you can get some quick improvements with using punishment and using the wrong techniques that seem like things have gotten a bit better in the immediate term. Like you'll yell at your dog and they'll stop, for example, or you'll yank on the chain and they'll stop what they're doing. But in the long term, things get worse. And we know that. And so that's also why it's in my book, I call it the poisoned apple, because it looks delicious, but problem is when you start eating, it doesn't turn out well at all. So yeah, those would be the main red flags.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of people on TV. I know I've seen a lot of episodes of expert dog trainers, and they're doing a lot of the things that you're saying that need to avoid, but yet they're out there for the entire world to see, and they're trying to get those quick
Yeah,
results.
it's really distressing and upsetting from from the experts' point of view, like the welfare experts in the universities and the world, and the behaviour experts. Like we're all on the same page. We're unanimous. We all disagree with these methods, and yet the TV producers and the executives that decide what gets put on our television and what gets paid to us, they're the ones that just think about the ratings and the charisma of the trainer and how charismatic they are and how many people watch it and what makes people tune in. And that's what they care about. Sadly, they don't actually care about reality. And so, yeah, it's just a really sad situation. And yeah, even in Australia at the moment, the show airing that is not as bad as they used to be, but still using the same techniques, so the same punishment techniques. And it's just sad. I'm hoping to get some change one day. And my book is hopefully going to help with that. I'd love for it to get out there more and help change, society's views.
Oh, and I'm certain it will, and I think you're kind of definitely, I guess, not really blazing new territory, but I think you're definitely making people more aware. And I think once people really figure out what you're doing and what you're trying to get across, I think it'll definitely help out a lot of people and a lot of pets. So try to relieve
Yeah.
some of that
Thank you.
anxiety,
That's-
some of those things. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Like I
That's
said,
really, really nice to say. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on today. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. Hope little Willow continues to be safe with you.
yeah.
Very, very cute little dog.
Oh yeah, she's got her little mohawk. But
Yeah. Oh, she's
she's
gorgeous. Just
oh
gorgeous.
yeah. She's a mess, but I wouldn't take $1,000,000 for her.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So
Yeah.
I'll say thank you so much
Great.
for being on, and I look forward to getting this out there, and hopefully a million people end up hearing it.
That'll be amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure to chat to you today. And we'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you.
See you later. Bye.